Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I wanted to call the meeting to order. If you'll all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, in terms of announcements and executive sessions, there was an executive session with the board held on March 7th, 2017 for the purpose of discussions regarding contract negotiations with the Methacton Education Association and to consult with attorneys on legal matters pertaining to tax appeal with Shannondale. That's it for the announcements. By way of attendance, we have everybody here except for Jim Phillips. And I guess we'll move it right on to public comment of the action item. Does anybody want to come up and speak related to the action item? Going once? Okay, let's move right on. All right, so may I have a motion to approve the elementary school sending boundaries as described in version 1, effective July 1st, 2017? Do I have a second?
Is it 3.0? It's version 3.0.
Version 3.0. Thank you. Second? Any discussion around this?
I just wanted to say that after the meeting last week, which I found very helpful, this is the first time I've sat through boundary information, and I appreciate the feedback from the community and the work that Malone and McBroom did. And I felt that there was 4 legitimate areas of concern, and Malone and McBroom tried really hard to address those, and they were able to address 1.5. And I also now know why you hire consultants to do that, because 1, they knew exactly what they were doing, and 2, they take the emotion out of it, because most of us sitting here know somebody who's been affected or are being affected ourselves. And I just feel that 3.0 did what was the best number-wise based on keeping the building's capacity at the safest. I don't mean safest as in security, I mean as in not getting too big. And if they could have addressed all 4 of the concerns, which they couldn't, I might have been happier, but I tend to think their first try was the best, although I wish I could make everybody happy.
Thanks, Andrea. Anybody else? Paul?
Yeah, I'd follow up on Andrea's point too, is I think when I reviewed this over the last week or so, is that I will be supporting scenario 3 because of the concept that we're putting our class sizes more at risk with 3.1 for the long term. So, in good conscience, no matter if it helps 1.5 of the 4 scenarios, I just feel like for our flexibility and for the making sure our class sizes had the less risk of pushing the envelope, I will be supporting 3.0.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I missed last week due to being away for business, but after reviewing the materials, having a conversation with Dave about it, 3.0 to me seems like the right long-term view for the school district. You know, I think that there'll be some people that have short-term pains. You know, the good thing is kids will matriculate through and kids will adapt fairly easy, or probably easier than the adults in most situations. But the long-term view of 3.0 seems to be the right choice for the school district.
One of the prime areas that I was concerned with in our discussions last week was the Eagleville-Woodland border around the area of Woodland and Oakdale and Clearfield. And I had hoped that we would have come up with a scenario that would have allowed us to move that border to Ridge Pike. But hearing Mylona McBroom's rationale for why they put the boundary where they did, and particularly one of the last things that they said really resonated with me, which was basically we have to choose between keeping this entire neighborhood in one school or maintaining smaller class sizes. And if I have to choose between those two things, it's got to be smaller class sizes. If we can't keep the entire neighborhood together, the revision of 3.1, which isolated just the one street of the neighborhood, to me feels like it would have more of a negative impact on those kids in that neighborhood. So my inclination, after a lot of back and forth, is to go with scenario 3.0 as well.
Any other comment? A couple things. So, I think I'd like to thank M&M for putting the first scenario together. It's clear to the people that attended the meeting that they really did their homework, and they knew the area very well and put a lot of thought into it. I also wanted to thank them for trying to address as much as they could in 3.1 and really taking in people's comments and everything. So I appreciate all their work. I think it was Brenda that said it at the last meeting. I think it was interesting that it was about half the comments that came back had nothing to do with concerns over where the boundaries were. It was more of an administrative or I'm fine with where the boundaries were. So we got to also be respectful of those people that said they're happy with the boundaries, as well as the people that were concerned about them. So for me as well, I think the original one, the 3.0, is where I'll land. Okay, so any more comment before we take a vote? Who wants? Sorry, I should say all those in favor? Yep. Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. Motion to adjourn the meeting? Second? All those in favor? Okay, thanks. Kyle, you can leave. Appreciate you coming out.
That was a quick trip.
Anytime.
They should all work that well, Kyle.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Sorry.
Should have left the engine running.
This was a 7-minute meeting?
Do we get a discount?
Sure.
Well, I've been known to have long meetings, so I am going to take and celebrate this one moment of having a 7-minute meeting. Well, I'm trying to kill time until Dr. Katona has time to get down here and join us, because she's gonna.
She wasn't expecting it to go that quickly.
Yeah, she's participating. Little musical chairs here. All right, moving on to the regular board work session. I wanted to call this meeting to order, and again, if everybody could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Any public comment on the last one, did we?
No.
It was just straight vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here we have no announcements or new executive sessions, other than to say that the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purpose of rebroadcasting. The attendance is still the same. All are present except for Mr. Phillips. Now we're going to move on to recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Under recognition of guests and scheduled speakers for the March 28th meeting, we'll have a presentation by Mr. Savitz as part of the Electric Car Club presentation. We'll also have a school transition update from Ms. Gorla, and a homeschool presentation from Arcola Intermediate School. And then, I'll just go on with the rest of it. So then we'll, at the March 28th meeting, we'll go over the committee reports as normal. As you can see, then, since there's no action, further action scheduled for this evening, there'll be public comment available on action items for the 28th. Then the board will accept board meetings, and we'll move on to fiscal items. So on the agenda under fiscal items, there are several items. There's a list of bills, treasurer's report, and budgetary transfers, as well as the MCIU membership services budget for 17-18, bank account for taxes paid under protest, as well as the MCIU compensation plan, student activity account, and the district management group proposal. So I think, if, in all reasonableness, I'll start with the MCIU membership services budget, because the first three items, the bills, the report, and the transfers are all typical items. But under the member services budget, annually, the IU provides a budget for services provided under the statute that IUs are able to bill districts for. And this is, and I need to be clear on this, this is not inclusive of all of the services that IUs provide. It doesn't include many of the special education services that they provide, transportation services, and so forth. These do include the state mandated services, and as listed here on the agenda, the amount would be $74,740, which will be our contribution from Methacton to the $1.761024 budget for the IU. And that includes, basically, it's a decrease from last year of $2,673. Are there any questions from members of the board related to the MCIU membership services budget? If not, I'll go on to the bank account for taxes paid under protest. It was recommended at the last meeting of the Finance Committee that as a result of my description of the process for our discussion on the fund balance, which was a carryover from the February meeting, that the board adopt as recommended by not only our auditors, but by the Finance Committee, adopt and establish a bank account for the purposes of depositing the funds resulting any taxes paid under protest. Currently, we have one vendor, or one taxpayer that addresses this matter, and I'm asking for your approval. The Tompkins Vist Bank is a bank that we currently are banking with, and the recommendation is on the agenda. Are there any questions about this particular item? Okay. The next item is the MCIU compensation plan. I want to explain that the compensation plan is different from the cost plan. This MCIU fair share and compensation plan are the parameters associated with students who are placed from out of district or by the IU into our classes, or when our students are placed into other MCIU classes in other districts. The purpose here is to provide a fair and a fair share cost distribution across all the MCIU districts in the instance that special programs for students with special needs that aren't provided for in the district can be provided for in neighboring districts. And therefore, if we have children in those other districts, this fair share and compensation plan sets the rates and the parameters for which either we provide space for other students or our students are there placed in other districts within the MCIU. So there's no cost associated with this at this point, because we don't know if we have any students that fit this, nor have we committed any classrooms here in Methacton for the use by the IU at this time. If that does come about, we will make the board aware of it and give you any other further detail. Are there any other questions about the MCIU compensation plan? Yes.
Just quickly, Dave, how many people this year are in this? How many students? And what would the cost be for that, if any?
We have one student.
One?
So we have one Methacton student placed in another district.
Do we know roughly what the cost is?
About $45,000.
45? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
These are all special education students, is that right?
That's accurate.
Thank you.
The next item is a student, I'm sorry.
Just one last one. Do we need to actually have the fair share and compensation plan attached to this if we're going to approve it?
It will be attached tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Good point.
Any other questions on, okay. Student activity account, this is a standard request for any new student activities as per policy 618. Under district management group proposal, it is my recommendation that you approve the attached proposal from the district management group in the amount of $5,000 to assist us with the final stages of the high school scheduling as listed in that proposal. In general, the proposal outlines setting the processes for how the schedule will be developed and how the checkpoints will be put in place. Let me give you an example of what that means. For those of you who have been members for a number of years, you know that typically in October we would review the undersubscribed courses, have a conversation about that, and try to address those matters in the following year. With this proposal, it's my recommendation, and it's going to be the work of the district management group to provide a process whereby the decisions are made in advance so that we're not sitting with the number of undersubscribed courses that we've experienced in the last several years. That's one part of it. The second part of it is to assist us with, best utilizing the information associated with the current request, as well as how to implement that within the teacher assignment and selection process. Are there any questions on the district management group proposal? If not, okay.
So when we contracted with them originally, this was not contemplated to be part of the work that they would do under the base contract?
That's accurate. As you know, they provided 2 phases of reports to Methacton School District. They did a review to assist the high school with information associated with selecting the best scheduling structure. I believe it was either at the February or January meeting where Principal Landis had presented the results of that information and the work that she and members of the high school have completed. And it was her recommendation that from all that work that a hybrid type schedule would be something that we should work towards. It's not something that we're going to implement for the 2017-18 school year, but because there's still some work to do, but it provides the best opportunity in her review to provide students what they request and to reduce the amount of study halls and things of that nature. There was a second part of that proposal that was provided, and it looked at the overall staffing associated with the Methacton High School, and it's my intent to share some of that information appropriately through the next several months as we work towards the budgeting process.
I think you just answered my question as well, but I just want to double check because I read through the proposal and I sat through at the education meeting the proposed schedule. So I have 2 questions. One is, so this work, some of it, since it's going to be due this spring, is going to help us for the next year, meaning because we have decisions to make for the next year, but then is some of this work also going to help tweak that schedule that we're using for 2018-19? So it's...
I think I understand what you're asking. There's some immediate benefit for the work that they've done and the work that we're asking for here, and then there's a long-term benefit in talking about the process for which we prepare the schedule. That's outside of the realm of the use of scheduling software. There's a lot more that goes into the process and the checkpoints along the way that allow us to make sure that enough eyes have seen the schedule and enough discussions and decisions are made void of isolation from any one individual and/or group of individuals. So it gives us a better perspective long-term, not only for the scheduling for the 17-18 school year, but going forward.
And then, I do understand why we need this. I do. I'm curious, because sometimes we don't ask these questions because we don't think about them. Because it is, the whole reason we're not doing it next year is because there's a lot that's going to go into this scheduling change. So is this $5,000 in this proposal going to cover us, even though the schedule change isn't going on for more than a year? Like, I'd rather know now, oh yeah, well, we might be bringing you another proposal.
I want to be clear that what I'm suggesting here does not have anything to do with the implementation of a new schedule structure. Okay, so if in fact there's a lot to work through, we would need to work with the association as part of developing an understanding and the intent and the purpose behind any structural change. And so that may take some time. That may also take some input from outside consultants. I don't know that just yet. I know that we've had a lot of discussion. There's a lot of work done on coming up with the recommendation associated with the hybrid schedule, which in my opinion, has some very good, valuable aspects to it, but it also, because it's different than what we currently have, will certainly be challenged by the standard that we've already set. So with that said, this recommendation here has nothing to do with a future structure. This talks about the process of getting to any schedule on an annual basis, as well as talks about helping us specifically this year in looking at our staffing and how best to utilize them.
I did misunderstand the proposal then, so it's just for the immediate time.
The immediate and long-term, the process for getting from point A, which is creating a catalog of courses through student selection and all along the way, so where, the superintendent, the curriculum director, people that have direct responsibility, the HR director, all those people who have special considerations to be aware of the points along the way that get approval. Right now, that's not the process, and we need to get a process in place for the long term, and that's what this is designed to do.
I do. It kind of goes along with a theme which I think is important, is so we're kind of outsourcing another part of a process here. They gave us a report, and now we're kind of asking for something a little bit more. The price of it doesn't seem that bad to me in comparison, but do we feel that this puts us in a better place consistently moving forward where this is money well spent? And the second part of that is, what is lacking on our part? Is it a certain skill set which can't get us what we're looking for here? Is it manpower, timing? There's just not enough time in the day. If you could just explain a little bit more.
The first thing is, yes, this is, in my professional opinion, this is money well spent because it will provide a process and a set of guidelines that, we will follow administratively, that when we get to the point where we're talking on an annual basis about courses, you're not going to see 3 pages of undersubscribed courses. I mean, that's, we're going to use the idea here is to utilize our staff more efficiently. The second part, the answer to the second part of your question is, I think it's a combination of many things. I think that while we've we've scheduled the way we've scheduled, and we know that way and that process well, we need someone outside the box to kind of give us some guidance. In addition to that, I think it's about manpower too. I mean, it's not something that I'm able to just jump right into and say, you know, while we're playing business manager and superintendent, it's going to be a little challenging. And plus, you know, we have school consolidation and a couple other items. So while I'll answer any questions you have, I'm going to tell you that this is money well spent, and I'm asking you to approve it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. That ends the financial items, and the number 10, personal items. Dr. Harney?
Yes, first on the agenda is resignation of classified for Edward Hahn. The next is an employment classified. I want to make a determination here. I made a mistake in the wording of this. It is a new position. It's not part of the realignment of the Title I situation that Dr. Katona can give some detail to if we need it. If you look at the next one, change of status, that's what I had tied it to. We did make some adjustments to two of the positions that were already approved to better utilize the staff. And I don't know if I can ask Mrs. Katona just to jump in there and kind of define a little bit about that realignment that we had talked about.
Okay, so the realignment was with G, change of status classified, where Arcola moved from having 2 part-time instructional assistants to 1 full-time instructional assistant. It made it more efficient, and the person who is doing this knows a good deal about the students and is very capable of carrying out the function. The employment of the instructional aide at Eagleville, this is a 3-hour aide position that was requested as the school went through the review of the mid-year data and found that from among all of their students receiving Title I services, that there was a group that was still struggling to some point with both basic math and reading skills. And so the additional 3-hour aid was requested. We have the money available in the title funds because of some other categories that we had expected to spend that we haven't so far, and we're able to move that money to it.
Thank you, Dr. Katona. I appreciate that. We also have 1 compensated leave professional for your approval next week. We have an uncompensated leave classified. We have 7 supplemental contracts, 2 of which are for our summer school, 4 are for coaches for this spring, and 1 is the list of the extended pay for our winter sports. We also have our list of volunteers that are attached, and I understand they'll be updated on Friday, so there should be some more for next week on that list.
Any questions for Dr. Harney?
All right, one of my favorite subjects, the extended season pay. Just clarify for me, when we hire coaches, they're just hired for the season? Are they also hired for Pac-10 playoffs? When does extended season start?
Extended season starts beyond the regular season schedule.
Even if part of your regular season schedule is your league playoffs? Are league playoffs considered extended?
Dr. Harney, do you know whether league playoffs are or not?
I'll have to get that from Dr. Spiewak.
I mean, because it just seems to me if part of your schedule is then you play in a league, playoff system automatically based on how you finish your record, that should be a part of their basic pay because it's part of the season, really. You don't have an opt-out of that. I can understand if you make a district playoff or a regional playoff or a state playoff that there might be something there, albeit I would say a coach's job is to progress them as far as they could. That should be an expectation of our coaches.
Yeah.
Certainly if it's the league playoff is part of your schedule,
Yeah,
That-
I
that
think we
just-
we can certainly argue your points. The issue is, there's a plan in place that describes exactly what this means. I'm just not 100% versed on the question you're asking, so I'm going to get that answer.
Okay.
And then at some point, while I mentioned this in several meetings ago, we are in conversations with the association as the contract so determines to review that particular compensation aspect of the contract. And that'll be eventually at some point a discussion for the board, and that's the time when you're going to likely have more questions and possibly, make your point about those matters. So it's not there yet,
I get you.
but it's something that we have had discussions on just I think it was last month was our last meeting on the matter. But let me get the answer for what you're asking, and then, it is what it is until we change it.
I understand. One other question I would like as you get those answers is, what percentage of our coaches are in fact MEA members, not retired, but active teachers? Because I know there's a fair percentage that are retired and I would assume not covered by the MEA. And can we have different deals for those versus the ones that are covered by the MEA contract? Why couldn't we have a different contract mechanism for the rest? I mean, if we're hiring a third party to coach, then, maybe that's an expectation in a revised contracting for a non-teacher that we should consider.
That's a good point. I think we treat both non-teachers and teachers the same. So
Maybe it's time to separate and at least slowly migrate away from it.
Well, I'll share that with the Contract Negotiations Committee and make sure that they're aware of that.
But why would that even impact them if it's a non-teacher? I'm trying to understand.
Well, because it's currently the practice for us to treat teachers and non-teachers similarly in the agreement for compensation. And so there's a plan that outlines the compensation,
But they're not covered by a bargaining group.
you're accurate.
So why are we
You
just
don't have
doing
to-
that as a courtesy? Because if we don't have to do it by law or by contract, then it's by choice.
And Mr. Dorn, I understand what you're saying, and you're raising good questions. I would just like to speak, being a former coach, I was a coach for high school soccer, and if you divided the amount of hours you spend versus what you get paid, it is very minimal. So, and I know that's not the argument that you're making. I will just say that I had to stop because it wasn't worth my time away from my family, even though I love doing it. So it seems, when I saw $21,000, oh my gosh, and I do see what you're saying, but I will speak up for coaches. It's not glamorous. The money is not glamorous, so that's why I chuckled last week last one of the meetings with the amount of money that other professionals were making. So,
I get
and then
it.
you bring
I
good
coached when I
questions.
graduated for college for 3 years for free. I donated my money back. So, I do understand what you're saying, but I think there's got to be an expectation of excellence in our coaches that we expect you to try to make the playoffs, and not just for the extra compensation. And I'm sure none of them are doing it for the extra compensation. I'm sure they're doing it because they like the sports. But we also, I think, have to recognize there is a difference between people that are covered by the contract and people not covered by the contract.
Let me look into that, and if need be, we can certainly touch base with our solicitor to find out what options we have as you presented that. But what I understand is you want the percentage of coaches in the MEA that are MEA members, and then we're going to look at, are we treating the MEA members and non-MEA members equally, and why are we doing that? And what options do we have to either continue that or not to continue that practice?
Yeah, and the third piece is, if the Pac-10 league schedule includes a league playoff system that you automatically make, it's not a district bid at large or an earned district bid, why isn't that considered a part of the season?
Yep. I'll get all three of those. Thank you for the questions.
Before, okay,
Number 10 for Dr. Harney.
yeah.
Personnel items.
Oh, we're still on?
Yeah, we're still on personnel items.
Yes, I have
Okay.
two questions. One for Dr. Katona. I think what I heard you say was that we had two part-time instructional assistants at Arcola Intermediate, and we converted that to one full-time position. So is there something that will be done for the other part-time person? Is there another part-time person? Will that person not be leaving the school district?
We initially had, with the title funds, we initially had hired a 5-hour aide to cover literacy in grades 7 and 8. We knew that we need a little more of a focus on math. We hired a 5-hour aide for 7th grade and a 5-hour aide for 8th grade. One of the aides was offered a teaching position elsewhere. And so we advertised for the 5-hour aide to fill that, did not find anyone, and thought that it would be a good idea then to restructure that into a 6.5-hour position for the other aide, who actually had been a long-term sub for us in math and knows the math curriculum, knows the kids, and so it is working out fine.
Thank you. And I also had a question on J, the accounting specialist being away for, looks like about 7 weeks. How do we handle that? Because it seems to me that they all have regular things that they do. I know with teachers, we have substitute teachers. Do we have substitute help for that work?
We do have substitute help. If there are no other questions on personnel, we'll go on to curriculum. Dr. Vito, oh, okay.
Go to that. Couple comments, circle back. So you might have noticed that we're going to have Ms. Gorla do a school transition update. We're planning on having her do that every month until the school year starts to keep on top of everything. It's a big transition, so we feel that that's important. So this is just not a one-time thing. And thanks, Kim, for the suggestion. That was a good idea. Dave said it was too good of an idea to come from me, is what his words were.
I didn't say that.
Also, the other recommendation is that probably towards the end of the summer, we're going to have to start having Mr. Fritz come in and give us updates on all the building and all the construction going on. We paid to have that spreadsheet built, and that has all the budget numbers in there so that we can track how we're coming against those numbers, and also help us, as the year's out to forecast for that. We get into discussions around, spending $5,000 or $21,000, which is appropriate, but we got a $10 million budget number out there. So I encourage everybody to really take a hard look at all the numbers when we start having those meetings and really get into the details, whether it's at the finance or the facilities meeting or here at the general board meeting, because I don't think any of us want to just liberally spend $10 million. We want to get all the work done and do it for the most fiscally responsible amount that we can. So just to give you a heads up, on a regular basis, we're going to be having kind of an in-depth discussion about the money we're spending. We aren't starting it now because we really haven't started that spend now, but we're going to be doing that for as long as we're spending that level of money on the facilities that desperately need it. Okay.
Just to confirm, is that my approval to get into the weeds?
I want you in the dirt below the weeds.
And I think it's also important as a prelude to Mr. Fretz having those presentations and coming before the board about some of those projects. It would be good that at the I believe either the work session or the voting meeting in April, I'll do a summary of the field construction project and the costs associated with all that. So I just want to make sure that the board's aware of that as well.
And to add to that, that's to really get into the weeds of what went well and what didn't go well with that. That was, in the recent years, that was our biggest project. And, you know, when we manage through that now, we're paying for all the, you know, all the soft costs and everything and all the overruns. So I don't look at that as, you know, trying to point fingers or assign blame. Right now, it's a lesson learned to keep an eye open for things as we now go into a phase when we're going to be spending even more money than we did on that project. So again, we're going to get into the weeds on that. And, you know, Michael, if you want to get even lower than the weeds, you know, feel free, because it's an educational process for us all.
Hey, Chris, I apologize to the rest of the board if it's out of order here, but just for the sequence of what Chris just commented about, I was going to add at the end that I would request that we put some type of transportation update on the second quarter for a monthly review as we get, so we do not repeat the same process that we did last year. So even if it is a cursory April review, I would like to have an April, May, June, July, August, for that matter, update on transportation, please.
That's a good point.
Let me just, I'll discuss with my team how to best to do that, but I agree, we need to have some, you know, gauge of the progress that we're making on that. And that may also be as part of our report maybe from Ms. Gorla as part of the transition, because you know, a lot of it's being affected by that. But we'll look at that, and we'll certainly have that as part of our reports back to the board and the public. Good suggestion. There's no other suggestions. We're going to move on to item 11, Dr. Katona, curriculum and programs.
So on the agenda, what appears on the agenda this evening and will be on for next week is the list of texts that we are going to make available for public review following next week's meeting. At this point in March, it isn't an item that's voted on. It's an informational item. However, it's to give you I would say a first look, but I know we've had a few first looks at this, at the items that we are bringing before you. So I gave each of the board members a copy of the presentation that I had given at the Education Committee meeting earlier this month, and I just wanted to go through this with you to explain, again, what the books are, what the programs are that we're looking at, and of course, in particular, the elementary ELA, which we know is the highest in cost. So basically, I offered a couple of slides on the rationale for bringing in new resources. The third slide shows our current series that is being used was brought into our district in 2008-9. The copyright is 2008, which is, of course, prior to the PA course standards. The assessments that came with this series that we are still using are theme-focused rather than mastery of skills, rather than a focus on mastery of skills. There is some content within that is somewhat dated. It must be supplemented, and while there's nothing wrong with supplementing a resource, because no single resource necessarily does everything you need it to do all the time, this has been heavily supplemented to a point where it's difficult to identify why we're continuing focusing down the road that we are with it. There are now limited follow-up PD opportunities, and so some of the practices have been a little different because people have become used to doing a certain thing and working toward certain themes in different ways. It is out of sync with research-based balanced literacy approach, which we have been working on over the past year and a half, and has limited embedded differentiation. Additionally, typically with a curriculum cycle, you have a resource review that restarts every 5, 6, or 7 years, and again, we are a couple of years past that. There's also a rationale from the data perspective. Again, this is only data from PSSAs, so again, it doesn't tell all the story necessarily. But we do know in 2015, the PSSA changed. When you look at the data on here, you can see on the left chart the decrease if you start up at grade 3 in 2013 and go down through 2014, 2015, 2016. You can see gradual declines in those scores. When you look to the right, and this is perhaps, this is a little more concerning to me. When you look to the right, you see the growth projections, and you see that in grades 4 through 6, they were in the red for both the 2016 school year as well as the 3-year average. That's not to say students didn't grow, but according to the PVOS data based off of the PSSA, they did not necessarily grow to the extent they were expected, which is basically a year's growth, and they were relatively far below that. The light blue at 5th grade that we showed shows more growth, and that I would attribute largely to the additional work that has been done at 5th and 6th grade, but especially 5th grade, where they have their teachers teaching reading and writing together. Just as an understanding of those projections, what you see there with the 65, 75, and 70%, that's a representation of students with a 70% chance or better of proficiency. So you see what those numbers are. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not basing everything on this data. The first slide talking about some of the issues with Storytown, thinking about the need to put the right resources in the hands of teachers and students so that they all can do their absolute best work. I think our teachers have done a good deal with what they have now, but I would say that we're going to continue to plateau because we don't have skills-based resources. So the things that we have done so far in terms of the actions that we've taken, beginning in October 2015, we started with balanced literacy workshops with our administrators, worked through that more last year with teachers, continued into this year as much as we could, given that we've had some different math and focus in services. Last year, I worked with different groups of teachers from different grade levels, as well as the reading specialists and intervention specialists, to work on the skills, looking at the skills progressions and the standards, and we came up with documents identifying skills to be taught at each grade level. The teachers have that document. At 5-6, they've worked with the former director of the Pennsylvania Writing and Literacy Project to build common vocabulary around literacy. The Reading and ELA coordinator created online resources. So we have been doing a lot of work for the past year and a half or so to kind of build up to getting teachers new resources. We've been working with practices. We've been working with giving them some other supplemental places to look and looking at how we will rebuild the curriculum. The process that we use for the selection of the materials, we were looking for something that was balanced literacy in its approach with identified skills. So we looked at 2 particular series, Benchmark Literacy and Wonders Balanced Literacy. We had, as you can see there, a number of meetings, presentations, and reviews throughout the review, and that went from last July through February. Throughout the review process, teachers submitted questions in a Google Doc, which I would then provide responses to. We also contacted several other districts that were using Wonders or Benchmark Literacy to get feedback from them, much like we did last year with Math and Focus. And so the recommendation, again, came out to be the Wonders Balanced Literacy. The next slide just shows the different areas that we had on a survey for the teachers. We had put this out to the teachers. They were able to work in teams if they wanted to go through the materials. Everybody had all the materials for their grade levels to go through. Again, continue that asking questions, and then we asked for their survey results by a certain point in February. The next slide then shows what those results were. Now, just to note, they were not comparing one resource to the other. That is, we were not asking them which of these two do you want. We asked them the same questions regarding content of lessons, technology, writing, etc., for benchmark literacy as well as for Wonders Balanced Literacy. And in the end, the overall conclusions, as you can see, Wonders Balanced Literacy was at 83% favorable, and benchmark literacy was at 57% favorable. So certainly a concern was, how are we going to support the teachers in this? We're moving into the second year of Math in Focus, and then we would be bringing a new ELA resource. We have been working on different pieces related to professional development. We want to structure it in a way to allow for this new system, and as teachers are building new teams, given the consolidation. The initial professional development will occur prior to the end of the school year. They would then have their materials for summer planning. A group would work on some summer curriculum writing so that we make sure that those skills that they worked on last year are embedded in that curriculum writing. We would also work on getting certain resources that they would be able to start the school year with, the online resources, get those copied for them so that they would be in place. I am also going to be recommending that we have a teacher on assignment for ELA, as well as a grade level liaisons as we have for Math in Focus this year. That has been a great help and something several teachers have asked about. We would then continue with our professional development next year in a way that would allow them to continue learning more about the resource, but then also give them time to work together so that they could do planning. And we would also have some parent sessions next year. So the cost of the Wonder Series is $498,390, and that is for approximately 2,040 students from K to 5. You have there on this slide a number of items that are included with that. The comprehensive bundle with the 6-year online subscription, a number of things included in that. The WonderWorks, which is for special education and remediation for students that are not quite at grade level in accessing. There's also some specific there are also some specific resources for English language students, especially for new students, and then we also have professional development in that. And so that is the Wonders series. I don't know if you want to ask questions now, and then we'll move on.
How much was the cost of the benchmark literacy series?
It was comparable.
Was it? When you said you talked to other school districts about what they were using? Is that correct?
We found out who was using the two that we were looking at, like districts that were fairly close to us, and had conversation with them about their implementation, got their feedback about different pieces of it, the technology, the assessments, etc.
Was there one of the two that more school districts were using?
Wonders.
Predominantly Wonders?
Yes.
Okay.
We did talk about this at the Education Committee, and one of my concerns is that having introduced the Math in Focus this year for K to 4, and considering all of the other issues that the teachers will be dealing with next year, I am concerned that adding this to their burden is a lot. with the consolidation, teachers may not be in the same buildings they were in. They'll be perhaps on a new team. We have a new student information system, and they'll be just in the second year of the Math in Focus, which was a whole new change in the math program. So I do have a concern about asking the teachers to take on this burden, if you will, in the second year of introducing an entirely new math program at the same level. So I did express that the other night, and you felt that, if I remember correctly, that generally the teachers have gotten to where they need to get with the math, so that you didn't feel uncomfortable with introducing this, and that your main reason for doing it is your concern about where we are in providing the ELA training to the children and getting them to where they need to be in learning.
Yes.
You feel that this is something that the teachers will be able to do, even with everything else we're throwing at them, if you will, for September.
I do, and I appreciate, you know, I can certainly appreciate what you're asking and what you're saying. I do think our teachers are a lot more comfortable with Math in Focus right now. You know, 100%, you know, I'm going to go out and I've got everything exactly as it needs to be. No, that's still going to continue to take time, but certainly going into next year, they're going to be in a much better place than they were this year. Again, my primary concern is that our students, this is getting our students skilled as they need to be with literacy is not just confined to K-4 or K-5. It's K-12. They're moving through, they're moving up, much like with math. We needed to sharpen their math skills as they continue to move on, and we're working on that now with the resource that we have. They have to be prepared for much more rigorous skills as they move up in literacy as well. And right now, we cannot do that. We are using assessments that go with the series that are theme-based, that have nothing, I won't say nothing, but they are not skills-focused. They are theme-focused. And this is a different approach. And yes, it will be new. The materials and that and the approach is new for teachers, but at the same time, I would say that with our teachers going, some of our teachers going into new places and forming new teams, I have a hard time seeing the sense of them forming those new teams with a resource that has lived beyond where it should. And if we're then saying, well, then next year we'll get them a new resource, now they're going to take all of that with them. They're going to form these new teams. They're going to decide how they're going to implement all of this together. And then next year we're going to say, oh, here you go, here's something else. I know it isn't going to be an easy thing for everybody, but we are going to put in place all the supports we can to make sure that it's as smooth as possible. And I think it does create an opportunity as they go into their new teams to have something that they can really work on together and how that will be delivered.
Thank you. And the other thing that I raised at the Education Committee meeting was the cost of this program. I happened to notice that when we introduced the math K-4, that the cost of that for all the same students was less than $200,000. And I wondered why the cost of this is so much greater than that.
So the math was actually K-4 and this is K-5, so you do have some additional students in this. However, when you get a literacy resource, there are all different types of books included. There are fiction, there are nonfiction, there are trade, there are leveled readers, there are tons of books, and Andrea knows. There are many, many books that each classroom teacher gets for the students. And then, of course, you have the online component, which the math does as well. But I do want to mention that back in 2008-9, when the district adopted Storytown, the cost was over $460,000. So it's not that far apart from something that we purchased 8 or 9 years ago.
I know at the last board meeting, board members expressed concern that we didn't discuss enough the student information system, so I just wanted to pipe in real quick as the Education Committee Chair, because this is a large amount of money. And we have spoke for 2+ months about timing, because Brenda and myself both brought up the timing, that it is a lot, math on top of ELA, and I was fighting it tooth and nail because I was concerned. However, another thing that was discussed at the education meeting is being fair to our teachers, recognizing it's a lot, making sure they were given the time and the support. That's why this ELA person is important. And I will also say it is kind of a catch-22. I can't speak for all teachers, but I know many of them are desperate for a new ELA materials, and the reason for that is because and I'm an English teacher, and I just got a new system this year that I'm working through, I hate calling it a program, new curriculum. You're literally trying to fit a square peg into a circle. And I'm not a big data person, but when you talk about the PVAS, the red and the light blues and the proficiencies is very concerning. And with the new expectations, it is very difficult to teach without the correct materials. And we could probably argue Storytown wasn't the best choice, but it doesn't matter because the curriculum changed anyway. And I know in the corporate world, and I will give Mike credit, Mike came to me and said, do we really need this curriculum? The supplementing's been going so well, and asked a good question, and we do need it, and the supplementing has been going well, but it is needed, and the timing's not great, but the timing's never great. So I appreciate Dr. Katona and Dr. Zerbe working with the Education Committee, and it's needed for our students to be fair, because the expectations they are asked to reach, they need the correct materials. A teacher can do anything he or she can, but they need these new materials to be where 2017 is. And in 10 years, hate to say it, we're probably going to go through it again, because that's the way education works. And I'm sure it's like that in medicine. You get new drugs, you get new laparoscopic things, and so this is what we need. So I know it's an expense, but this is also, we're trying to be efficient in our spending, and this is probably one of the most important expenditures that we have.
Any other questions?
Thank you. As Andrea did mention, I did have some questions after the last meeting. I just wanted to get some background information, and she did alleviate some of my concerns. I do have a couple other questions. We mentioned that the teacher surveys that were completed and how they were asked the same set of questions for both benchmark literacy and the Wonders Balance. Was there any questions about the current Storytown? So nothing was geared to them to say, are you satisfied, strongly agree with what we're currently using? It was just about the 2 new resources.
It was only about the 2 new resources.
Okay. A second question was, we mentioned the 7 districts using either of the 2 that we selected. Were there other school districts in the area who were using different resources? It sounds like we kind of picked the 2 that we wanted and then found the ones who were using that. Was there a review of just general surrounding to see what other ones were being used?
We did have a summary of what everybody was using, and and when I say we, I mean administrators, we took a look at some of those different possibilities and narrowed it down to Wonders and Balanced Literacy based on the type of program delivery we were looking for and what we thought would best fit the skills that we had together in our document.
Okay. And Ms. Reese did mention the supplements. And I guess my question here kind of goes along to, I guess, what comes with the supplements and then the actual cost. So did we look into using the official Storytown Common Core enhancement packs? Because they actually have their own supplementals which are designed, because they know, obviously, that their book was copyrighted in 2008, 2009, before Common Core, and since then they've developed their own enhancement packs to go along with this material. Have we looked into that at all?
We did not look into that. And what we did find out, though, is that after, I'm not positive if it was after this year or next year, they're not even going to be supporting their online component associated with Storytown.
Okay. And the last one was, and this is maybe a little bit too hard to answer here, but are we concerned at all with any of the state and federal movements in education that, is there going to be the attack on Common Core? Are we going to, go ahead and throw $500,000 into a new program to try to catch up with standards which we're behind, only to realize that they're just going to move the bar on us again? Do you have any feel for, the climate, I guess, in state and federal?
That is certainly a question that we asked, as soon as, I guess as soon as they started talking about ESSA as opposed to No Child Left Behind or whatever, and we said, where are we going to go with this? And we've talked at the IU, they have their connections directly to the state, and the state has indicated that they have no intention of moving away from the PA core. They feel that these are solid standards, solid skills-based standards that we can continue using, and that whatever else happens in the climate, in the educational climate and political climate, that our students are going to need to develop in these skills.
Thank you.
I will also just give a layman answer to that real quick, Mike, because it's a very good question, and that's why we worry about being here in 10 more years. It's one of the reasons I'm more comfortable with Wonders, and I think some of the teachers were as well, because some of the other things that are out there are geared so much to the test that, yeah, what I'm using currently, if they change it, we're stuck. Wonders has that balanced literacy, so although, yes, it's more geared to the Common Core, it's more what kids need to learn. It's that balanced literacy. It's the critical thinking. It isn't teaching to that stupid test. And it's not full of consumable garbage and worksheets and stuff. So that's another reason that made me happy. But it is, you ask a very legitimate question, and it's why it's expensive, because it's books, 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 which is what it should be.
Mr. Dorn?
Okay, a couple questions, Dr. Katona. When you talked to the other districts that were implementing this, did they give you any indication about the percentage change in their test scores using these new materials that they experienced?
Some have not been implementing long enough to be able to address that necessarily. Some have said that they have seen an increase in their scores since using it.
But no percentage translation?
Not a percentage,
10%,
but
3%?
no.
Is that something that we could get? I mean, not that it necessarily pertains, but to me, if you get a couple of districts that are doing it that have implemented a while ago and they see, 3 to 5% or something, it kind of gives us a gauge of what we ought to be thinking about from our results as we implement it.
I can certainly go back and ask.
I think it would just be interesting to understand. Next question I had, the $498,390, you give this list of things that are included. Is there anything additional not included in this number that we would expect additional cost in the future years during this, implement, kind of the time frame that we'd expect to be the life cycle of this?
Certainly within we have a 6-year subscription bundle, which means the access to the digital online component is covered under this for 6 years. Following that, there would then be a per-student cost that we would pay
For the digital.
for the digital. As far as the materials themselves, there is nothing, can I say this? I can't tell you that there is nothing that we're going to need to purchase in 6 years, like as a replacement, or, we get, some different groups of kids or something like that, or we have our EL numbers increase or a special ed or something, so we might need to get an additional kit there. But it should not be anything that's, substantial.
But during this 6 years, this ought to cover us for the most part.
Yes. And again, there may be a book, a couple books here or there that we need to get because something, was torn or whatever the case might be, but there should not be anything substantial within this 6-year period.
Okay, and then last question, with this whole subscription 6-year, is this a one-time charge, or is this spread over 6 years?
So that's one of the questions that we discussed at the Education Committee meeting, and currently as it's planned, it would be to pay for it over 3 years, with the first payment being in the 16-17 fiscal year, and the second payment being in the 17-18, and then 18-19. As a result of that conversation and questions around the use of the materials over a 6-year cycle, we are in the process of negotiating other options that would allow us to pay for it over 6 years. And we're going to then compare that against that option to see whether or not a longer term might require interest, and we're trying to negotiate that out. So we're currently looking at better ways to afford the resource, and we don't have that information just yet.
Okay, and then one last question, and this might be more of a finance-related question. If it's expected to have a 6-year life cycle, do we get to amortize it from an accounting perspective, not a cash perspective, over 6 years? Or is that not done the way we do it in the corporate world? No? So there's no accounting treatment that allows us to do that?
I'm not aware of that. The accounting will be when when it's budgeted and then when it's expended in the year that it's expended.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Katona. I have a couple of questions. At the Education Committee meeting, I know you had mentioned, I have a different number written down in my notes, so I seem to remember that there were...
89 versus 98.
Yes. Okay. Because I had it rounded to 490, and I thought I wouldn't have rounded down, so that makes sense. I know you had talked about there not being consumables as part of this package, but that there would be copying and things like that would need to be done. I have no idea, does that factor into the cost? I mean, if we're making copies for 2,000 students, I don't know what our copying budget looks like. I don't know if that's a drop in the bucket. I don't know if that's something that we need to account for. Is it typical, atypical?
Currently, while they do have consumables, we pay somewhere around $70,000 to $75,000 a year for the consumables, and that does not include other copying that is done. For example, all of the theme tests are copied, and it's several pages per theme test per grade level, and so that is not currently included in that amount. So there is a good amount of copying that is currently happening. Yeah.
And I know that we surveyed the teachers on their opinions of the two different curriculums. And I understand, to Andrea's point, that there is certainly a level of enthusiasm about getting a new curriculum, that the teachers are eager for it. Did we talk to the teachers at all about their feelings on the timing of the change? And they felt that the time crunch that they could potentially be under with having other obligations and other work going on in redistricting and changing teaching assignments and things, that it would be offset by the value of the new curriculum.
I've had conversations with a couple different groups of teachers and with some teachers individually about that, and certainly they have concern about taking on a new resource in the midst of all of the change. And, I cannot say to you, that they said, yeah, it's worth it for us. It's, they're definitely, a little, I don't want to say afraid, but, they're a little wary, certainly. At the same time, in the next breath, they recognize the importance of doing it. At one point, I had considered, and I talked with some of them about, maybe if we get a couple from each team that can start this next year, and then the next year bring in the others. And then as we talked about it more, and I thought through that more, it would be a nightmare in so many ways. And so again, I think seeing it as an opportunity, even though, yes, they're a little wary and they want to make sure that they're going to have the support that they need, and so we want to provide that. But I think once they get into it, they will be ready to go.
If I could just add to that, Dr. Katona has worked with several of the building principals to come up with a list of, I believe it's 7 items that the administration will do in order to provide time for, in addition to any of the other professional development that we already have scheduled during the school year, so that they can, they can devote, time to the implementation process. So that's another piece that she hasn't mentioned that is clear that we've, taken the concerns into consideration and are making adjustments to improve the access to time to work on the materials.
And that saved me from asking my last question, so thank you.
Okay, real quick, thank you again for your time. I just want to highlight, I think, part of the Education Committee, one of the things we tried to make sure we understood that this was a decision based around the needs of the students, not the scores of the PSSAs, although the PSSA scores are indicating that there's a problem, but the Dr. Katona and administration is recommending this based on the skills needed, not for the sake of score creation. So I just want to highlight that is the basis for this decision or recommendation. So the second point really is, I think, the timing, as we've discussed and so forth, but our teachers are also lifelong learners, right? So the principle of learning something new and jumping in from a perspective and from a timing, I think it fits in from that perspective. It's not I'm discounting the concerns they have, but I think it's just that's what they are being asked to do and they need to do from that perspective. The one question I have for Dr. Katona is on when we come to the resources. I know that it's maybe still in the lurch about exactly how but you're probably going to reduce the number of math teachers on assignments in the budget so that you can fund in some ways the K through 6 ELA support. Is that the recommendation?
Yes. While certainly both of our math teachers on assignment are valuable for us and have been valuable for us, I would recommend that we do keep Mrs. Golden in place for K-4 math next year, going into the second year of Math in Focus, and with all of the changes at the elementary level, and that if we need to give up a teacher on assignment, that we would lose our 5 through 9 teacher on assignment. I think we've got fewer at that point. I think Mr. Fortier has done a lot in terms of helping them get set up with the new resources that they have, and we now have curriculum coordinators at each of those levels who are regular full-time teachers, but they take on the role of assisting teachers in their buildings with some of the resources and the online components, et cetera. So I think they're in a good place where they will be able to continue that. And so the ELA teacher on assignment for K to 5 would be a replacement there.
And that was my last question, is that the K through 5 also talks about supporting the 6th grade. So is it a K through 5 ELA support, or is it a K through 6?
It is K through 5. The Wonders Balanced Literacy is being purchased, is recommended to be purchased for K through 5. 6th grade did look at it, however, they felt that it was too young for their students, and so McGraw-Hill has a different resource that they are still looking at, and they would like to use it, have it kind of, a couple of them go through a trial with it next year to see if it's something that they would then adopt the following year. But that would be, again, it's the same company, but it's a different resource and a lot more nonfiction focused.
So I just would ask for clarity on the proposed K through 5 teacher on assignment, because it does reference 6th grade in the job description a little bit, so. Okay, that's it, thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Katona, for taking the time to go through all this. Most of my questions have been answered, in particular how we're going to pay for this. But would you say that this new curriculum, as compared to Storytown, as far as addressing the needs of those with special educational requirements, would you say that this program handles that aspect a little bit better than Storytown, or what's your thoughts on that?
This resource, I would say, can address the needs for special education as well as for enrichment and our EL population to a greater extent than Storytown. There are, I believe it's 5 different levels of readers for this particular series. There is also what is costed out, or what's mentioned here under the cost as WonderWorks, which would be for our special education students who need to be outside of the regular classroom. And so it's, again, teaching the same skills, but using material that is more well-suited to what they can handle.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I feel that Storytown has failed a lot of students going through the school district over the past few years. Point blank, they cannot write. They go through Skyview and Arcola, and they just cannot write. I've talked to several parents about this, and this curriculum, I always thought was some of the topics that they had to go through just did not make any sense to me. Why are they talking about stories and going through this and breaking down a story when they're not even writing? They're not writing anything. So how do they learn how to write when they're not even doing it? So that's what I really hope that this $500,000 program will do, is teach our kids how to write. And you'll know it. You'll see it in the scores, in the test scores. You'll see it in these things. It's a big jump, and I realize that the curriculum needs to be updated. And the timing of it, I wish were better. Having to go through it and start it now, I do have some serious reservations about that. But if the teaching courses are good to go with it, then okay. So, thank you.
Any other questions on the Wonder series? If not, Dr. Tony, you want to continue on?
Okay, so the next few slides are on the Algebra 1. Again, our Algebra 1 texts and our math texts through the high school are somewhat dated. So the rationale, again, I started with in terms of why we want to bring in new textbooks at this point. We have been working on strengthening our math teaching and learning across grade levels. There's a focus on better alignment of math curriculum and resources, which again has been brought in large part through the assignments of Mrs. Golden and Mr. Fortier, together with our curriculum coordinators. Currently, we're in our first full-year implementation of Math in Focus, as well as the Glencoe math resources for pre-algebra and algebra bridges, and those are all, we're getting very positive feedback on all of those. Students who don't pass Algebra 1 Keystone by the end of 9th grade are enrolled in a foundations course, which provides additional practice with algebra concepts. And we are basically in need of Algebra 1 resources that address the PA core. Again, our current copyright date is 2008 on the algebra. I have a slide with some of our scores. Our Algebra 1 Keystone, these are the spring results, and you can see from 2014, 15, and 16, you can see that our Arcola students generally do quite well. They dipped a little bit in 2015, but they generally do quite well on the Keystone, on the Algebra 1 Keystone. These, of course, are some of our students who are the strongest in math as they have come through to 8th grade, and so they're in Algebra 1 in 8th grade because of their strength in math, and so they do fairly well on that assessment. Our 9th grade students in Algebra 1 struggle more, as you can see. And then when you look at the PSSA results, again, we know that in 8th grade, the 2015 exam, the scores dropped considerably because of a lot of changes that were made, and we started to come back up a little bit in 2016. So one of the things that we wanted to look at in terms of a resource was that while we want the resource to address algebra, obviously, because that's the course, we also wanted there to be some attention on those 8th grade concepts, because we need to make sure that our students who are in 8th grade getting Algebra 1 also have access to some of the 8th grade concepts they need. And certainly with our 9th grade students, if they were struggling with those concepts as they came through 7th and 8th grade, we wanted to make sure that we have a resource that will help them address that as well. And so not just the algebra, but also some of those other basic 8th grade skills. So again, we went through a process here of reviewing, a little bit different than the literacy. We were dealing with a much smaller number of teachers in this. Mr. Fortier had contacted the publishing sales rep back October, December. We had conversations with them, brought them in to see what they had to offer. He gathered samples of 6 different resources, which he took to Arcola for review by those teachers in December. They provided feedback and ranked them according to their preference. Then in January, he took the resources to the high school teachers. They did the same process. In January, mid-January, we had both publishers present to the teachers on the 2 resources that the teachers had narrowed it down to, and they worked through the textbook evaluation form and chose the Glencoe Algebra 1 textbook. Again, we look at professional development. There will be a full day of professional development prior to the end of the school year. The high school Algebra 1 teachers will have an introduction to Connect Ed, which is the online platform for this. And then all Algebra 1 teachers will have an in-depth look at the supplemental resources attached to Connect Ed. Teachers will have their materials for summer work. There will be time at the beginning of the next school year for collaboration, and then we will have we'll schedule in-service time for follow-up work. The cost for these materials is for approximately 450 students at $39,217. This includes classroom sets of textbooks and a 6-year online subscription for digital access for all students, as well as professional development.
Well, we start down her, going around. Kim, do you have anything?
I just have one. Again, at the Education Committee meeting, you had mentioned, so this price of $39,000 includes 300 books for the 450 students, correct?
Yes, classroom
With the
sets.
idea being that they're classroom sets, not
Yes,
necessarily
and they
for
would be
take-home.
able to take the books home if they needed to, but
And-
they would all have digital access.
But I also understood it as for $3,000 more, we would get enough books for all of the students to get one. Is that correct?
Yes, about that.
I'm just wondering, $3,000 in a budget of our size doesn't seem like a whole lot of money to really ensure that all students have access at all times, and there really are no limitations to access to the text. I'm just wondering if that might be something worth considering. Again, it just seems like a drop in the bucket.
Last year, when we got the pre-algebra books for grade 7, the teachers had requested that we do the classroom sets and the online resources because of, storage for one thing, as well as the idea of students carrying around those books all the time. And so when I spoke with the sales rep at that time, we were not able to do anything where we could get the digital plus the classroom set. It was going to cost so much more. And so we went with the book for everybody and then the digital. This year, they did change what they do, and now we are able to get the classroom sets and the 6 years of the online component. I think part of the thinking in this is, again, first of all, that the students would be able to take the textbooks home if they need to. And the other thing is, we know that in 7th grade next year, we're going to start with the one-to-one, and then the following year in 8th grade. And so our students would have that online access. Of course, I mean, obviously, if they don't have the internet at home, then that would be an issue, but they can take the hard copy. So if the board, again, and this isn't to vote at this time on anything that's here right now, but if the board would like me to go back and look at doing that instead, I can certainly look at it and see if there was any other reason that we would have gone this way. I don't recall offhand.
No, I appreciate that. I had kind of forgotten about the Chromebook one-to-one initiative. I am basing this strictly on personal experience in my home, having 2 children fighting over one computer to do homework, and having that textbook in the house sometimes is really a benefit. But yes, we will have Chromebooks invading us soon, so thank you.
I just have one question. We mentioned the foundations course, if you don't pass. Is there, I guess, what is the current textbook being used for that foundations course? Or is there not necessarily a textbook? Is that more of a mixed match of concepts that's put together? And is that going to be the same moving forward with the new textbooks? You would just kind of mix match concepts as opposed to a textbook?
The foundations course, in the foundations course, the students use something different than they do in Algebra 1. I apologize, but the name is escaping me right now, but they do a lot of online with that because it's a lot of practice where they can, it will take them up in their skills or give them, problems that are more specific to what their area of deficiency is. And so it's more of a practice and then reinforcement from the teacher on those skills.
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick, are there any additional costs to the $39,217 over that 6-year cycle? Okay, thank you.
You indicate that there's a full day of PD prior to the end of the school year. Will there be other PD needed where you will have to be having the publisher come in, or can we do the PD in-house?
Professional development is included in the cost from the publisher, and so Ms. Ricky will be working with the publisher to determine how those sessions, we'll get so many sessions with the publisher. And then there will also be times, though, that some of our own people will do some things.
Any other questions? If not,
Okay, the last one. These are books for a course that was approved back in November, the Honors English Writing Fellows, and these books would be for 15 students. There are 3 there, the Bedford Guide for Writing Tutors at $352.35, Tutoring Writing at $490.05, and the St. Martin's Guide to Writing, $390.75.
any questions on those items? If not, we'll go on to policy number 12.
Sorry, just one question.
Sure.
Just because we were just talking about the scheduling, have we consistently had 15 students in these courses in the past?
This is a new course for this year, and so if we have 15 students, we will run it. And if we don't, that's what it was slated for, was 15 because of the nature of the course, where they're both getting instruction and they will then be actually tutoring other students in their writing.
So the books wouldn't be purchased until we have the enrollment?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more on that. And there's no online version for these? I mean, so each student would be spending $1,200 on for these 3 books. Is that the way I should think about it? $1,233, 15 students, just...
Yeah, the total of these 3
1,200.
would be divided by 15.
Divided by, so this is, okay.
That's the total. That's based on
not in
15
each.
students,
Okay.
right.
All right. All right, thank you. And no online versions?
Not that I'm aware of, I can certainly check.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go on to item number 12, policy. There are items on the agenda for first reading, 6 policies, and then there are items for your approval at the March 28th meeting that include 8 policies. Are there any questions on policies for first reading or for second reading?
I have a couple of questions on some of the policies. Policy 606, which is, I think, for second reading. This is just a technical thing. It talks about real estate and per capita taxes by the elected tax collector, and then all other taxes by the other tax collector. But I think per capita taxes are not collected by the elected tax collector. I think they're collected by Berkheimer. Yeah. So I have a couple of others as well. Sorry. On payment of bills, policy number 616, under that it says that each bill or obligation must be fully itemized, verified, and approved by the board before a check can be drawn for its payment, except for 4 categories of items. Is that the practice we currently use? I don't think it is. So I guess I have a question about why would we be approving a policy that is in conflict with our practice?
Yeah, this one's a bit of a head scratcher as well for the policy committee because this actually came up. And if you look at the legal aspect of this, it is actually part of the school code. So we kind of wind up in a bind ourselves as our school district can't basically supersede school code. So we're kind of in a...
Well, I understand that we need to have the policy be in conformity with school code, but it seems to be the practice.
It's a catch-22. I think you're making a good point here. I'm going to recommend that, if it's okay with the policy chair, that we bring that back for further discussion. I think it's a very important matter that we kind of straighten out.
Yeah, we certainly can.
You okay with that? Okay.
You might want to, since obviously we had this discussion and talked about this, that we might want to loop in the solicitor, I'm guessing, ahead of time, so that we don't meet have the same discussion again and then wind up back here.
Good.
And then I just had a question about another one. It's number 621. It's the local taxpayer Bill of Rights. And under authority, it says the board shall adopt a local taxpayer Bill of Rights. And of course, the administration would do it. But I wonder, do we have such a Bill of Rights?
That was a question from the committee. I haven't discovered those just yet, so I'm still
Okay.
working on that.
Okay, well, but I mean, if we adopt this policy, we just need to create one.
Yeah, this will be in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have a little time yet, but
Okay.
they're the exact same question that we got from
Okay.
Policy Committee. I just
Thank
don't have
you.
the information yet. Any other questions on the policies? If not, we'll move on to the next item. Next item is other. Under gifts and donations, we're going to ask you to approve a gift of $300 for the backpack program at Audubon Elementary. The next item will be for trips, to approve a trip for Methacton High School and Arcola Intermediate Science Fair Club to Penn State University for the Junior Academy Science STEM competition on May 14th. Item C, we're going to ask you for approval of commencement exercises. We were asking that commencement be scheduled for June 9th at 4 p.m. At Methacton High School for the class of 2017. We also have under item 13, revised instructional calendar for the 2016-17 school year, and that's basically approve the attached revised instructional calendar. That includes an additional Act 80 day for grades K through 4, and on May 30th, and 2 make-up snow days on April 12th and 13th. And then the last item under 13 is to improve the instructional calendar for the 17-18 school term as attached. Any questions on any of those matters?
I have, sorry. I didn't raise my hand, I went right for the microphone, I'm sorry. Real quick, Dr. Harney did answer my one question, but I thought it might be a question everybody has. For the 2017-18 calendar, if we approve that tonight, I had asked him, can it be changed? And the reason is, there's 3 flex days, and we're in contract negotiations, so he said it can be changed even if we approve it tonight. So I just wanted to reiterate to the board. What?
A lot of pressure.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know we had a sidebar.
Just so you know, we're not approving anything tonight. Okay? Yeah.
Next week, are we
Okay.
approving it?
And certainly, if the administration makes a recommendation to adjust the calendar, similar to what we're doing with the 16-17 calendar, we certainly can make a change.
Okay. And then my only other question was, sorry, Dr. Harney, was last year we approved the 4 p.m. time for graduation, and I believe that was the first time that a time change had been made in a while. So did we receive any feedback for that? And I know it was based on some student discussion and with the principal. I just wondered if there was any feedback about that time, since that was a new time last year.
Yeah, the feedback, I think, is twofold. First of all, we heard good feedback from families that allowed them to, participate in the graduation ceremony and then celebrate afterwards. Typically, when we do this at 6:30, by the time we're through the ceremony, it's challenging for families to, find restaurants that are willing to stay open to 10, 11 o'clock at night. So those are some of the things that we've heard. On the flip side, this time frame is a little bit more challenging for our staff to participate. And what I mean by that is some with daycare matters found it a lot easier to have the 6:30 time frame where their likely significant other would be home to be able to care for the children. So there's really not a time that in our discussion is going to be suitable for all individuals. I think this takes into consideration the celebratory nature of this event, and allows people to really be able to participate in many ways. Again, it is a Friday evening, a 4 o'clock start. We should have we will have good weather, and it'll be on the field like it was last year. So we're looking for your approval on that. Are there any other questions related to the commencement? I mean, that's, no?
No,
How
just,
about
is there,
any of the
there
instructional
is no
calendar?
rain date, it's just inside? Is that the plan?
We don't normally have a rain date. So what happens is, if in fact on that day there's for some unknown reason there's a weather concern, and we've had those probably 2 years ago, in the last 2 years, not last year, but the year 2 years before that, we held the graduation in the gymnasium at the high school. And while that doesn't necessarily allow everyone to participate, it does, we have a process in place, and it's been well received those 2 years that we've run it. Now, understand that those last 2 times that we ran it were the first times in 21 years that it was held inside. It just happened to end up doing it in 2 consecutive years. So, yep. Any other questions on commencement before we go on to maybe the calendar questions? I imagine you might have some on that. Anything else on commencement? Okay. How about on the revised instructional calendar for 16-17? Anything? If not, how about the calendar for 17-18?
Right here.
Okay.
It wouldn't be another approval of a new calendar without me making my spiel. And you should know it by now. Why are we having school on Monday, June 11th? You have 181 days in the calendar, student days. You've exceeded your minimum by 1 day. You have abilities to move the start of school if need be. So why are we having that school day on the 11th of June?
So as we generally discuss administratively, and then certainly share with the association, we originally started with the concept of having the student start begin before Labor Day. That's been our administrative goal in order to get as many instructional days in as possible. And it's similar to some of the neighboring districts, such as North Penn, Wissahickon, Perkiomen Valley, Souderton, who all are members of the North Mount Cove Vocational Technical sending area. So when we looked at that, we had a calendar prepared, but we also knew that there was a decision imminent in terms of school consolidation, and in order to provide the best amount of time for the transition processes, it's my recommendation that we leverage our time associated with that, so that we provide the teachers with 3 professional development days prior to the first student day. And the only way that I can do that is with a student start following the Labor Day holiday. If I were to start the student day before the Labor Day holiday, I'd be forced to reduce the amount of professional development days prior to that, and it doesn't give us that extra breathing room. Not saying that I need it, but I want to make the best anticipation for our transition, and that's why I'm recommending it. It's not my favorite recommendation, but it is the right one for the situation before us.
So why can't we move the 3 teacher prep days to start on the 28th of August, on that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Have first day of school on the 31st of August, and then Friday, either be a full day or half day, whatever. Then you have those 2 days to work out some transportation bugs. You have the kids getting introduced to their new classrooms, very low key, very informal, and you get 2 days in. And then you start full tilt on the 5th of September. And that's my question. And then also, when does the Tech Center start?
Well, the Tech Center will start just bear with me. The tech center is starting before Labor Day. I have a draft of what that calendar is. They haven't adopted their calendar yet, but what I have in front of me, which I know you don't have, lists some of the original draft information that we as superintendents from the sending districts have been cooperating with to find a common start time. But as you might be aware, as you sit on the vocational board, you know that we don't all start at the same time. So the case is, but all the districts other than Methacton will be starting before Labor Day.
Correct. We're the only one that will not be starting. So our kids are at an immediate disadvantage. And again, the cost of doing a bus run is how much for one day? About 40, 50,000?
No, that the 40, 50,000 is the yearly cost for a bus.
For one bus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So you divide that out. But anyway, so if you run the buses on the 11th of June for a few hours, that means that seems a monumental waste to me as well. So I really would like to see if we can, do this. I don't know if there's support on the board or not for this, but every year we go through this, and every year we have, issues about the start time. And this year, you don't need to infringe on the MEA's contract. We are well within our bounds, well within our right to start school, when, on that 31st date. Plus, I think it's a golden opportunity to get those 2 days in and get the kids, you have 2 days in a row to work out any possible transportation bugs, any new classroom bugs, any things like that, in a low-key startup thing rather than starting on the 5th and having to spend 2 or 3 days working them out then. Because if you have those 2 days on the 31st and 1st, then if you have a, God forbid, a major catastrophe with busing again, you have Labor Day weekend to figure it out and get it set so that we're back up and running again, okay? That's just the one point about it. The other main points is that, to get the tech kids started all the time, on time, which they never do, and they're always behind, to save that day of costs on the 11th, and also to get more in line with the rest of the districts around us. Okay? Thank you. This is a good year to try this, to get this done.
Yeah, Mr. Roth, I don't disagree with your comments and your position on the matter. And if this was a typical year, we're going into a typical year, I would have come with multiple scenarios and provide an option, some thought for the board to consider. But my recommendation, and I said this along the path as we were talking about school consolidation, and I made the recommendation then when we were going through the process that I would recommend this type of a calendar starting after Labor Day. But if the board so wants me to come up with other revisions, I mean, this is certainly your decision. I just want to make sure that I'm providing you my recommendation, and if you want different options, I can certainly give them to you. But right now, I agree with Mr. Roth in terms of what we should do, but if it was a typical next school year, I would have those other options for you to consider.
I also just think you have that Monday, the 28th of August, sitting there with nothing going on.
Tell me, I'll take the direction of the board. I want to do the best that I can here.
So I agree with having the last day of school on a Monday, particularly when it's not a full day, does not make sense on multiple levels. It doesn't make sense for families when they're planning their gap childcare between when school ends and when camp starts, or planning vacations, or really planning much of anything to have kids come in for 2 hours. And I know, I guess it counts as an instructional day, but I just don't see that there's any actual instruction going on that day. However, we made a commitment to families impacted by the school consolidation that we would not start school before September 5th, and I will not go back on that, because those are the families I think that are going to be under the most stress at the beginning of the school year.
We did make a commitment? The board
Yes,
made a
in all of the-
resolution?
No, in the presentations that we did at the elementary schools, we told them that we would not start school before September 5th.
Well,
And-
that's premature and that's incorrect, because that is not something the board voted on or even made a resolution on. So that is something that, I did not say that. I did not agree to that, nor did I
Yeah,
that was made up.
let me just do clarification. You're right, there was no action taken by the board. It just so happened to be that was part of when I was presenting and the conversations that we've had, it was mentioned from me multiple times that, this is what I would do in the instance that we were presented with a change in building structure for the 17-18 school year. So you're right. I mean, but everything has been implied that that's the process and the steps that I would take. The board has an opportunity here on the 28th of March to adopt the calendar, and if it's not the one here, I just need direction about what it is the board wants me to do.
So I guess then, to answer that question, I would like to see a revision of the calendar that would eliminate having the last day of school fall on a Monday. Whether that means adding an extra day so that the kids go for 2 days that week, from a parent's perspective, I wouldn't want to see that. I'd love to see them end on the 8th, but it just seems kind of silly to have the kids come in for 2 hours and there isn't really anything that's accomplished other than running our buses.
Okay, and I appreciate the comments, and I understand what you're saying, and I agree, it's a challenge to have them come in Monday. The challenge that we'll have is if you want me to take it back so that we end on a Friday, all we need is a third snow day, and now we're back on a Monday. So I just want you to be aware of that.
And then you can change the calendar like we're doing in 16 and 17.
And I also think...
Well, the 16-17 calendar isn't changing anything other than reflecting what we would normally take off from.
The board can change the calendar, instructional calendar, to add a school day if need be. Because if you have a major blizzard that knocks out school for 5 days, you've already blown through your 3 days, right? So.
Well, again, you do have the right to change the calendar, and you can certainly change that calendar. However, we can't add school days because we need people here to watch the children, and there's a contractual matter associated with these days. So when we add days, we need staff here to be with them, and so I need direction. But I will tell you that if I add a day and move things to the 12th, I mean, I don't know if that's much better. Or if I move it back to the 8th, we're still going to be in a situation potentially faced with the same result. And I can't predict the snow days. I certainly can't predict, whether or not, what would happen there if we moved it to the 12th. Let's say, for example, the 11th would be the graduation.
But the way that this is written, it says snow days, if needed, will be made up March 28th and 29th. June 12th, 11th, or 12th, 13th, and 14th. So we do have that possibility built in there. And honestly, from a parent's perspective, if you said the last day of school was June 8th, and we got 2 feet of snow 5 different times that winter, and you had to change the last day of school, I would understand that that's life, that's what happens. But to knowingly plan on ending school on that 11th is a different scenario in my mind.
Any comments from you, Paul? Okay. From my perspective, I think the most important thing for next year is not whether we have a short day at the end of the year, but giving the staff and all the people involved with the transition process as much prep time as possible to prepare, whether it's preparing the transportation, preparing the buildings, preparing the curriculum changes, the team changes, and all that. So from my perspective, having the school start after Labor Day makes the most sense.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. If we decide to end school on the 8th, we only need to add 1 day, which would be, I guess, September 1st. Is that correct? So 1 for 1, right?
we would need to add a day back in, that's correct.
So it would be,
I'm not going to agree where, because I'd have to look.
well, I'm just looking at the calendar, wouldn't it just, if we go back in and don't change anything else, it would end up being the 1st, which is a Friday of September. That's not how to read it. I mean, I think my biggest concern is,
You're referring to the 22nd of September, or,
no, I'm referring to the 1st of September, starting it before Labor Day.
okay, all right, I see that.
I wasn't touching any of the other dates, obviously, I guess that could be an option as well.
To start school on a Friday?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I thought I heard somebody say Thursday. Oh, you said Thursday, okay. But it's just a one-for-one swap. But why would you start Thursday?
I would start it on a Thursday because you would move the teachers' prep days to 3 days, starting on the 28th. And then you would have the Thursday and Friday to roll out your school year, given all the changes that were happening with redistricting, the busing, everything. You would have 2 days in a row to run school. And if you decide to have Friday as an early dismissal day, great, But you have those 2 days done, then you free up the 11th at the end of June. Last day of school is on the 8th. You still have even one more day of instructional, or tack it on as another, spring holiday or something. But you put those 2 days at the beginning of September, or end of August, the 31st of August and the 1st of September. They're just, you have that 28th of August just sitting there doing nothing, when you could actually make it work for the school district and actually have us, have a possibility of getting 2 days in before Labor Day.
Okay, I mean, I'm not so, I don't know if we need to add a 182nd day to the calendar, which is what we would be doing. We're required to do 180 days, right? So I guess one question I would have is, if we have a snow day, why couldn't we just go to a 180-day calendar and meet our requirements set forth by the state?
So plan for 181 and then just give up the 1 day.
Yeah. Is there a legal reason
Well,
that we need
I
to
think
do 1 day more than?
Well, I think the challenge might lie in the collective bargaining agreement with the Methacton Education Association.
So they're going to argue 1 day less?
Well, no, you're talking about how and where we place a snow day. The snow day is dictated by the collective bargaining agreement to be taken off of the first 2 snow days off of the spring break, and then everything else tacked on to the end.
Yeah, no, I got that piece, but I'm trying to understand the rationale of 180 versus 181. And if we schedule 181 and we're required for 180, why can't we just call it quits at 180 and meet our requirements by law for the state?
That's what I had originally said, my first thing, was just not even
I was trying to find what, I was trying to follow what you were saying.
But if he wants to keep the 181, then you got to put that extra day in there.
Yeah,
That's what
I'm just
so-
trying to get the rationale behind 181. I mean, I'm okay for full year school. My kids would probably kill me for saying that, but, it proves, but I just think we have to rationalize 180 versus 181, and if we decide we build a 181-day calendar and we have an extra snow day, we could just say, okay, as a board, we're going to make it 180 days and we'll fulfill our state requirements as a thought. I tend to think that we should start on the Friday for many of the reasons that Herb said. Friday's not a planned day for any activity.
Let me just give you a suggestion. That Friday is the Friday before Labor Day weekend. And so we're going to start school on a Friday. Is that what you're recommending? Before Labor Day weekend?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, there's a large amount of kids, at least the high school level, that are here already for band, for sports, for this, for that. So, a fairly large population is going to be participating in extracurricular activities. I understand the whole school consolidation thing, but quite frankly, if we're not ready to sail by that Friday, we're not going to be ready to sail on the Tuesday. I mean, that's just, we've got to be ready before that, because if we're dying on the vine at that point, then we haven't planned accordingly.
Well, you can plan as much as you want. What I'm trying to do is make the best judgment about time. And there's no question that having those extra days prior to the 5th will buy us some time if needed. I can't tell you that we'll need them, but I'd hate to be in a position where I've rescheduled it and I can't get those days. And that's why I made the recommendation that I made.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm in favor of starting on the 1st. Or changing the calendar and also baking in the one day, as long as it meets our legal requirements, that we have that one day.
I just had one quick thing. Honestly, the calendar, I'm not as picky about it as others may be, or want to see certain changes for certain reasons. I just had one question in terms of the 181. Is there a requirement of the 180 days plus hour requirement? And is that the reason why we've gone into the 181? Because we have, the 2 half days or the 3 half days that we build up into that? Is that the reason why we need the extra day to make up for the extra hours? Just looking for some clarification there.
A half-day counts as a full day, from what I had understood.
And you don't have to answer me now. You can have that question answered for the...
Well, there's certainly hour requirement and day requirements. I gotta look at that.
Just one comment on that real quick, Brenda. I'm just saying, I think the 181 is probably related to the April 27th, May 8th, where you're splitting the prom night versus the rest, so you end up at 180 days for the K through 8, and you end up 180 days for 9 through 12, was my how I read the calendar.
So I know some of our conversation and our concern has to do with the Technical Career Center. And do we know what the dates of the year for that is? Do they start in August or the 1st of September? And when do they end?
They're likely to start before Labor Day. I don't have the specific start date.
Okay.
I don't think they approved their calendar just yet.
Okay, and when do they end? Do you know?
They haven't approved their calendar
Oh,
yet.
okay, so we don't know. So it's really hard to take that into account as we develop our calendar and make sure that our children who go to that school get the same number of days of education.
Well, while I don't have the vocational school's calendar, I do have information that suggests when the other sending schools are going to send. And that will likely mean that they'll consider starting at the time when most schools are going to be starting.
Okay.
That's typically how they make their decision. So with most schools, with all schools other than Methacton currently prepared to start prior to Labor Day, they will likely start before Labor Day. I just can't tell you when they'll end.
I sit on the board, so I sit on the board at the school, so I can answer that question. It is a battle. They battle every year. None of the 5 schools ever agree on the same calendar, whether it's the start date or in-service dates, and it is a battle. So, and it is what it is. So I will wait my turn and let Brenda go, and then I have a few things to say.
So I agree that the having school on a Monday at the end of the year is not really productive for the students in any way. But I think one of the things that we have to have graduation the day before the last day of school, is that right? You can't have graduation at the end of the last day of school.
We can have graduation whenever we want to have graduation.
Okay, so you
But we've
could...
traditionally had graduation before the last day of school.
The day before, yes. So we could conceivably have the last day of school on the 8th and graduation that night. You want to have graduation on Friday?
It's not our, we did not look at the back end of the schedule and work backwards. We started with the front of the schedule and worked to the end. So it just so happens that not only did we consider the school consolidation and the starting of school after the Labor Day, but we also considered the right places to put the professional development in, and to consider professional development and any other days off that take into consideration the needs of our families. So I'll give you an example. If you look at September, that the 21st of September is a holiday where all schools are closed and staff is closed. However, the 22nd is a day where we thought it would be best if we put some of our ELA and Math and Focus professional development in for K through 4 and 5. I guess it'd be both. What is it? It's K to 6. Okay, so for K to 6, and that. So we're trying to find, convenient ways for the families as we're doing this to bunch up professional development. So what I'm trying to tell you is we work from the start of the school year, and then it just so happens when you start getting to the end and you got the days, you end on a Monday. It's not designed to do that. And it wasn't designed to have graduation on a Friday. In fact, other than last year, we've avoided having graduations on Fridays.
And what kind of flexibility do we have in terms of when we have to approve the calendar? From the standpoint of, obviously, by law, we're required to approve it at a certain point, but from the standpoint of how you manage the district, when do we need to approve the calendar? I mean, can we wait until we know more information, say, next month, or do we have to do it this month?
Well, I think what I think the information that you need would include maybe some adjustments to some of the comments that were made, as well as the information associated with the proposed start and end of the vocational calendar. And so with that piece of information, I think, and I should be able to provide that to you. The document I have just doesn't articulate that date for you. So I can certainly have that, and in advance of a potential vote for next Tuesday. Now, if next Tuesday comes and the board so chooses, not to approve a calendar, certainly we can adopt a calendar in April. But the further we go on, it makes it more difficult for families to plan. And so when we're looking at considering, our thoughts and considering the needs of our families, the further it goes out, the harder it is for them to plan summer vacations and all that kind of thing. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And I'm sorry, and one last thing. And as we don't adopt the calendar, we won't be able to allow Melissa and her team to formulate the planning that we need for the transition process, because this is all tied into that.
Okay, so connected to that, do you have a preference from the standpoint of whether it would be, say, the 31st of August or the 5th of September, which is what is on here? I mean, does the 5th of September appear on here because you feel that is the most expedient time to start school, given the consolidation process?
This is the proposed calendar as a result of the consolidation process. Nothing else. I would have brought you calendars that would start before the Labor Day holiday. I can give you I can give you all the drafts. We were working on them when we were prepared to do it, in the instance that a different decision may have been made regarding school consolidation. But this is the one that it was best suited for that outcome.
I can understand that that Mr. Roth is bringing this up. I will say that I will speak now for our K-5 teachers. Absolutely, Dr. Zerbe is 110% right that this year we will start on September 5th. There is not one K-5 teacher who's going to show up at 8 a.m. on August 29th and start getting ready. They're going to start getting ready weeks prior. They're going to start getting ready in June. And we have been very clear, we want to be extremely respectful to the K-5 staff with what they're going through, not with only with the consolidation, but with ELA. And they will be working many more days than 28th, 29th, and the 31st. However, I seriously doubt there's any staff member that's going to be planning a vacation close to that time. But they are owed the respect to have that weekend to finish last-minute things and hopefully take lots of deep breaths before they begin on September 5th. And I do understand ending school on a Monday is weird and useless. As a working parent, I'm like, keep them as long as you can. And I'm a teacher that starts way before Labor Day. My students start the Monday before. And I think we made that change because we need more days for the PSSA. And these teachers will start with these students on September 5th. And Mr. Roth brings up a good point that if we're not ready to go on the Friday, then we're not going to be ready to go on the Tuesday. I won't get into it because I could go on for an hour, but I understand your concerns, but for this year, it needs to be September 5th. Have to deal with other things, we can, but that's it.
So I guess, there were quite a few comments, some suggestions, but I don't hear unanimous suggestion that I go back and make some changes, so I need some direction.
I would like to see the calendar changed to eliminate that Monday, June 11th. Any way, shape, or form, however you want to do it. If we can't start before Labor Day, then at least get rid of the 11th, because it's a waste of money, it's a waste of taxpayer dollars.
Do you want me to go back, or do you want me to go forward? So that's what I want to understand. Do I go to the 12th, or do I go back to the 8th?
No, you go backwards until the 8th.
Okay.
You find a day somewhere in there.
Trying to get an understanding, because I
yeah.
can go either way, depending on how
The whole idea is to have, that school is done, finished after graduation. There's no kids coming back to the schools on the 11th. So the 8th is it. We've gone over this every year, every single year. And okay, now this year's not the year to do it. Oh, but last year we couldn't do it, or the year before. No, we have to try to start getting this down to a science, getting the school district to start before Labor Day on a regular basis, if anything, to create continuity with the tech center so that the other school districts can go along with it, okay? And, it's every year we go through this. And, I'd just like to see one year where I wouldn't have to start the debate process on this.
So what I understand is I'll look for the Monday. So I think we have at least 2 board members that are suggesting the Monday to try to
eliminate that.
Yeah, try to fix that last day of school.
If you can do that.
Okay.
Present an option for that would be good.
All right. Thank you.
Chris, I actually had a comment just on 13B, just real quick. Just for the concept of substitutes, we've had this cost to the district being generic like this before. We've asked, I think, just the number of substitutes. It might not be exact cost, but it would be interesting to know if we're having 15 substitutes or 2. So just some quantification on 13B, please.
I believe it'll be 4 substitutes, but I'll get that clarified, and we'll add it to the agenda for the voting meeting.
Yeah, so Dr. Zerbe, if for future comments like this, if you could put that in part of the voting, it just makes it a lot easier for clarity. Thank you.
Paul, and I would imagine number of substitutes and number of days, right? Because sometimes it's 1 day, 2 day, 3 day.
I'm going to support it. I just think it's good to have that clarity.
Good point. Thank you.
All right, so for next week's, for the voting, related to the schedule, either see if you can remove that day within the existing calendar and the existing start date. Is there enough interest in the start before Labor Day to have that as another option? I don't think there's...
I think it's just...
Yeah, okay. So let's try to work that, and then we'll have that as the vote. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And so that ends items under 13 and 14 are dates for board members' calendars as presented in the agenda. And then old business and new business. Go ahead.
I don't have anything under old or new. Does anybody else? Okay. And then courtesy of the floor. Anyone? John?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. A few items relative to your discussions this evening. I noticed that the front row is roped off here, and typically that's done because there's a presentation on the screen, and that would be where the people at the head table could sit to see it. And that didn't happen this evening. And with regard to Dr. Katona's discussion and handout just to the head table, I think that the audience here is interested enough to come out and be in attendance. So the audience could have had the handout also, or there could be some. There could have been something on the screen, and there's still no indication that the public through a PDF would be getting a copy of that handout. But I think it's, we're spending on ELA almost $500,000. So in the interest of transparency, what's the cost of a handout of even 50 copies, trivial. With regard to the...
Hey, John, one
yes.
comment. That presentation will be added to the agenda tomorrow, so you can have a copy.
All right, thank you. With regard to the district management group proposal, we contracted with them, I think it was maybe February of last year. The public hasn't seen any documents coming out of their the expenditure of 20-odd thousand or so. It seemed to me that the work at the high school was along the lines of having a better schedule, but the original proposal was in the interests of efficiency. And now we're going to vote next week on another $5,000 for those people. And, very simply, we're saying in the work scope, goal is to define clearer ownership of staffing decisions, optimizing class scheduling, and improving staffing efficiency. So efficiency is at the end. And I think the state constitution is clear that we should have an efficient school system. And for instance, come September, the enrollment projections are for about 40 fewer students in the high school. And I think the MEA staff at the high school has been pretty constant at 132, while the enrollment has gone down by 200. So in my mind, there's a clear indication that the taxpayer is not being fairly considered, and the efficiency mandate is not being fairly considered. I think there's a lot of excess cost there, and if we had those dollars elsewhere, we could sooner do needed renovations. The other thing I looked at is the list of bills, and there's one glaring item on this month's list of bills that really bothers me. It's an item on the general fund where the payee is Keystone Realty Advisors, and the item purchased is a CVS assessment appraisal, and the amount of money is $65,534. I'm not aware of any board vote to do an appraisal. People tell me that if you are going to do an appraisal on a CVS drugstore, that maybe $3,000 is the correct amount. So next week, I think we need a clear substantiation of why we should spend that kind of money, and a clarification as to whether it's something that the board has authorized. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Joe Bickelman, Audubon. I just want to echo John's concerns about that bill for $65,000 for a CVS assessment appraisal. Need to look at the backup for that, and because we just got into an agreement for Shannondale for $20,000, I believe. So we're talking about a parcel for CVS for $65,000. It just seems unusual to me. One item about the trips where it says cost to the district substitutes. I think you should put 15 substitutes, and the cost is $ amount. Okay? You need to figure out what it's going to cost to the district. Substitutes doesn't mean anything to me, and 15 substitutes doesn't mean anything to me, but 15 substitutes for a total cost of $ whatever, that means something to me. So you're using the word cost, so I wouldn't want to see something with a $. So do a calculation per day, how many days, district FICA, share whatever, they don't get retirement, so come up with a dollar amount there. I think you need to be aware or really look into the fact for the language arts expense. I think you might have to expend all that in next year's budget, the accounting for that. You might have to expend it all and set up a payable for any installment payments. So that's usually the way the accounting works on that. And I agree with the calendar. I agree with Mr. Roth about the calendar. That Monday is just, I can't see any point to that. And Dr. Zerbe, you said all the other school districts are starting before Labor Day that go to the tech school, right? So all the other school districts are starting before Labor Day, and the tech school is probably going to start before Labor Day because the majority, except for Methacton, is going to start before Labor Day. So I just think the tech school students here are getting cheated out of, I don't know how many days it is, a week worth of instructions. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Candy?
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. I have to agree with Herbie. This has been an ongoing discussion for years about the school calendar. He knows what I mean. Both my children graduated from Methacton, and they graduated on Monday nights at 6:30 on the field, before there was lights. My son just graduated a couple years ago. As a matter of fact, my daughter didn't graduate. The big mistake was, in the year my daughter graduated, was to have them graduate from your Sinus Field College when it was 90 degrees, and they put no limit on guests. So the field house was packed. Parents couldn't get in to see their kids graduate because everyone came. Traffic was a mess. They figured it would be easier than putting them out on the field here, which would have been better to leave them on the field here. So that was not a pleasant experience for my daughter, which should have been a happy day for her. She had a better experience when she graduated from college at Kutztown. But my son graduated on the field at 6:30 at night. We were off the field by 8 because it was getting dark. There was no lights. And Dr. Zerbe mentioned, on a Friday where you can go eat. Around here, places usually open until 12. Monday night, you don't find any place open after 9. But every year this is, I know this coming year there's going to be some dust up because of the consolidation, but if you have your ducks in a row and you do everything you're supposed to do, it should run smoothly. It sounds like you're worried there's going to be a problem. And if you worry, there will be a problem. You have to have the confidence that you put people in place to run it smoothly. And if they know what they're doing, things will run smoothly, even according with the buses. Now, the VOTEC school does start a week before Methacton. My neighbor, this year, when VOTEC started, had to drive her son to VOTEC every day because Methacton all the other schools were there. And she didn't want him to miss a week. And I said, what about your daughter? She homeschools her children. But her son went to VOTEC. And they have, for the last number of years that I can remember, started before Methacton. And the other school districts around us start before Methacton. So I think at some point, you're worried about instructional days for the students. I am all for every instructional day you can give them. But you can't base your school calendar on a teacher's contract. Give the children every day they need, instead of taking days off for PD days or whatever. They need to be instructional days. This is education for the students. Their education comes first. And if it's a problem with a teacher's contract to teachers, that's too bad. The kids need every minute and every hour they can get in the classroom. Because, as I've seen over the years, it's getting more complicated to teach the children because you're bringing in more programs all the time. And I see them being overwhelmed with all this. So you need to put, and as I heard over the years, the students come first. When it comes to the school calendar, the student comes first. And as far as that Monday, I'd like to know on the last day of school exactly how many kids really show up. I've seen over the years the very last day of school, in my son's class, maybe 5 kids were there because everybody else is already, because they figured they don't have to be there, even though the state requires by law you be there 180 days. So if it's on a Monday, they definitely won't be in the classroom. So I think it's something you need, but I think you need to have confidence in the people you put in charge for the transitioning and for the redistricting. Because if you're worried now, it might be a problem. But you need to you have to have the confidence in them and build the confidence up in the people that are in charge. And I think it will go smooth if you do that.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you. Motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming out.